The diner smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams at 2 a.m. I dragged the damp cloth across table 7 for what felt like the 100th time tonight, my lower back screaming in protest. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with that persistent electric hum that had burrowed into my skull hours ago, making my exhaustion feel almost hallucinogenic. My sneakers, cheap knockoffs with soles so thin I could feel every crack in the linoleum, squeaked against the floor as I moved between tables that never stayed clean for long. Emma, table 12 needs refills. Gary's voice barked from the kitchen window, his face shiny with grease and irritation. I nodded without looking up, tucking a strand of brown hair that had escaped my ponytail behind my ear. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the bone-deep weariness that came from working double shifts 6 days a week. The tips tonight had been pathetic. $17 in 5 hours. At this rate, I'd be short on rent again, and Mrs. Chen had already warned me that her patience had limits. The bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up immediately. Late-night customers were usually truckers or insomniacs, people who wanted coffee and silence in equal measure. But something made the air in the diner shift, a change in pressure, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. When I finally glanced toward the entrance, my hands stilled on the coffee pot. 4 men had entered, but only one mattered. He stood in the center, and everything about him screamed danger wrapped in expensive fabric. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been sewn onto his body. Even from across the diner, I could see the quality, the kind of clothing that cost more than I made in 6 months. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and controlled power. He didn't look around the diner the way normal people did. His dark eyes scanned the space with the precision of someone cataloging exits, threats, and tactical advantages. The 3 men flanking him were clearly security. Built like brick walls, with identical dark suits and that telltale bulge under their jackets that made my stomach knot with anxiety. One stayed by the door. The other 2 positioned themselves near the windows, their backs to the wall, eyes constantly moving. The main man, the one who mattered, walked toward the corner booth with a fluid grace that seemed almost predatory. He moved like violence was always an option, just waiting beneath that perfectly pressed exterior. Emma. Gary's hiss snapped me back to reality. Don't just stand there. That's a customer. Right, a customer. Just a customer who traveled with armed guards and radiated menace like cologne. I grabbed a menu with hands that had started trembling for entirely different reasons now, and forced my exhausted legs to carry me toward the corner booth. As I approached, I caught the scent of him. Expensive cologne, something dark and woody with notes of bergamot, mixed with the faint smell of cigarette smoke and leather. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "Good evening," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can I start you with some coffee?" He looked up at me, and the full force of those dark eyes hit like a physical blow. They were brown, almost black in the diner's harsh lighting, framed by thick lashes that would have been beautiful on anyone less dangerous. There was intelligence there, and something else. A calculating coldness that made me feel like he could see straight through my cheap uniform to every desperate secret I carried. Coffee. Black. His voice was deep, smooth like aged whiskey, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe? And whatever passes for food in this establishment at this hour. "The meatloaf is decent," I offered, then immediately felt stupid. What did a man like this care about my opinion on diner meatloaf? The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Meatloaf, then." I scribbled the order, acutely aware that his eyes hadn't left my face. The 2 guards near the windows were watching me too, their scrutiny making my skin crawl. I turned to leave, desperate to escape that suffocating attention. "Your name?" I froze, glancing back. "What?" He gestured toward my name tag with one elegant hand. "Emma. Is that short for something?" "Just Emma." Why was he asking? Why did he care? He nodded slowly, as if filing that information away somewhere. "Thank you, Emma." The way he said my name made something low in my stomach flutter uncomfortably. I hurried back to the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who the hell are they?" I whispered to Gary as I clipped the order to the carousel. Gary peered through the window, his face going pale. "Nobody good. Get them fed and out of here fast. Don't make conversation." But making conversation wasn't the problem. The problem was the way my hands shook as I poured coffee. The problem was how I could feel his eyes on me every time I moved through the diner. A tangible weight that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The problem was that something about him, about the danger he represented, called to a part of me I didn't want to acknowledge. I delivered his coffee with hands that only barely didn't spill it. He took it without comment, long fingers wrapping around the cup with the same controlled precision he seemed to apply to everything. As I turned to leave, the door chimed again. 2 more men entered, younger than the boss, wearing suits that were expensive but somehow less refined. They spotted him immediately and headed for the booth, their body language aggressive in a way that made the guards tense. "We need to talk," one of them said loudly enough for the whole diner to hear. He was blonde, good-looking in a cruel sort of way, with cold blue eyes and a jaw that looked like it had been designed for sneering. The boss didn't even look up from his coffee. "Marco, Vincent, I don't recall scheduling a meeting." "Yeah, well, we've got concerns." The blonde one, Marco, slid into the booth uninvited, his companion following suit. "About tonight's shipment, about the route you chose." I busied myself wiping down nearby tables, close enough to hear but trying to appear disinterested. Every instinct I had screamed that I should walk away, mind my own business, survive by staying invisible the way I always did. But something in the tension of the guards' bodies stopped me, something in the way they'd positioned themselves, not watching the 2 newcomers, but watching their boss with expressions that didn't quite match the loyalty they should have shown. "The route is fine," the boss said, his voice dangerously soft. "Unless you know something I don't?" "We're just saying it seems risky," Vincent jumped in. He was darker, stockier, with nervous energy that made him fidget. "Going through the industrial district at 3 a.m. with that much product? Could be asking for trouble. I'll consider your input." It was a dismissal, clear and final, but neither man moved. "Boss, we really think—" I said I'll consider it. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Now leave, both of you." They left, but not before Marco shot a look at the guards that made my blood run cold. It was a signal, silent and unmistakable to anyone paying attention, and I was paying attention because I'd seen that look before. 3 months ago, in a different diner in a different part of the city, where I'd worked the night shift and witnessed 2 men in expensive suits having a similar conversation. 2 days later, the news reported that a prominent businessman had been killed in what police called a targeted hit. The men I'd overheard had been suspects. They'd walked free. My heart pounded as pieces clicked together in my mind. The tension in the guards, the carefully orchestrated conversation, the specific mention of time and location. This was a setup. Those 2 men had come here to confirm plans, to make sure their boss would be exactly where they needed him to be. And the guards, his own security, were in on it. I should walk away. I should forget what I'd heard, collect my pathetic tips, and go home to my studio apartment with its broken heater and pile of unpaid bills. Getting involved in whatever this was could only end one way for someone like me, badly. But when I glanced back at the corner booth, I saw him take a slow sip of coffee, completely unaware that the men paid to protect him were counting down the minutes until his death. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. "Emma, baby, you've got too big a heart for this cruel world. It's going to get you hurt someday. Maybe today was that someday." Gary called that the meatloaf was up. I picked up the plate with hands that had stopped trembling, steadied by purpose now instead of fear. As I walked toward the booth, I grabbed a napkin and a pen from my apron. My handwriting was shaky but legible. "Your men are setting you up tonight. 3 a.m. Industrial District. Trust no one here." I folded the napkin small, palm-sized, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs from the inside. "Your meatloaf," I said, setting the plate down in front of him. He looked up at me, those dark eyes unreadable. "Thank you, Emma." As I turned to leave, I let my hand brush against his on the table. Just a moment of contact, skin against skin, his warmth against my cold fingers. And in that moment, I pressed the folded napkin into his palm. His fingers closed around it reflexively, his eyes sharpening as they locked onto mine. I saw the question there, the sudden, intense focus that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. I walked away without looking back, my legs somehow carrying me to the kitchen even though every instinct screamed to run. I didn't know if I'd just saved his life or signed my own death warrant. Through the window, I watched him unfold the napkin, watched his face remain completely expressionless even as his posture changed. Subtle, but unmistakable to someone who was looking, he became even more still, more dangerous, coiled tension wrapped in expensive fabric. He stood smoothly, dropping cash on the table without touching the meatloaf. His eyes found mine through the kitchen window, and the intensity in them made my breath catch. Then he walked out, his guards trailing behind him, completely oblivious to the fact that their conspiracy had just collapsed. The bell chimed as the door closed. I sagged against the counter, adrenaline draining from my body and leaving me more exhausted than ever. "You okay?" Gary asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Yeah," I whispered. "I'm fine." But I wasn't fine, because even as relief flooded through me, another feeling chased it, the absolute certainty that this wasn't over. Men like that didn't forget, and I had no idea if I'd made an enemy or an ally tonight. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, those dark, calculating eyes that had looked at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling of my studio apartment, listening to the radiator clank and hiss while my mind spun in endless circles. What had I done? The logical part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive through foster homes and homelessness and every other nightmare my 24 years had thrown at me, screamed that I'd made a catastrophic mistake. You didn't get involved with men like that. You didn't insert yourself into the violent, shadowy world of organized crime. You kept your head down, collected your tips, and survived. But the other part of me, the part my mother had called my fatal flaw, whispered that I'd done the right thing. That whatever else he was still a human being, and I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd let him walk into an ambush without warning. By the time weak November sunlight filtered through my threadbare curtains, I'd convinced myself that nothing would come of it. He'd gotten my warning, dealt with whatever betrayal was brewing in his organization, and moved on. Men like that had entire networks of people. Why would he remember one exhausted waitress who'd passed him a note? I was nobody. Invisible. Just the way I liked it. I pulled myself out of bed, wincing as my feet hit the cold floor. The apartment was freezing. I'd kept the heat off to save money. My breath misted in the air as I stumbled to the bathroom, avoiding my reflection in the cracked mirror. I didn't need to see the dark circles under my eyes or the pallor of my skin to know I looked as wrecked as I felt. My shift at the diner didn't start until 4, which meant I had the whole day to fill with nothing. Usually I'd pick up a shift at the grocery store or try to find odd jobs on Craigslist, but today my body demanded rest. I'd burned through too much adrenaline, and now I was paying the price. I made instant coffee, the cheap kind that tasted like dirty water, and huddled on my secondhand couch, wrapped in every blanket I owned. The TV didn't work, so I just sat there, nursing my coffee and trying not to think about dark eyes and dangerous men. The knock on my door came at noon. My heart stopped. Nobody knocked on my door. Nobody knew where I lived except my landlord, and Mrs. Chen always called before coming up. I crept to the door, palms sweating despite the cold, and peered through the peephole. A man in a black suit stood in the hallway. Not one of the guards from last night, but cut from the same cloth. Broad-shouldered, alert, with that telltale bulge under his jacket. He stared directly at the peephole, as if he knew I was looking. "Emma Carter?" His voice was professional, businesslike. "I need a moment of your time." Every instinct screamed at me to stay silent, to pretend I wasn't home. But he knew my full name. He knew where I lived. Pretending wouldn't save me. With shaking hands, I opened the door, but kept the chain lock engaged. "What do you want?" "My employer would like to speak with you." He held up a phone. Expensive. Sleek. He asked me to facilitate a conversation. I don't know what you're talking about." The man's expression didn't change. "Miss Carter, my employer is a man who values directness. You did him a service last night. He wishes to thank you personally. You can speak with him now via phone, or I can arrange transportation for an in-person meeting. Your choice." The unspoken third option, refusing, hung in the air between us like a threat. "Phone," I whispered. He nodded and tapped the screen before holding it up to the gap in the door. I took it with trembling fingers, the metal cold against my skin. "Hello." My voice came out small, frightened. "Emma." That voice, smooth and dark like expensive whiskey, sent shivers down my spine. "I trust Alessandro hasn't frightened you too badly." "I'm fine." A lie, but what else could I say? "I wanted to thank you for your warning last night." There was something in his tone I couldn't quite identify. Amusement? Interest? "You may have saved my life. I saw something wrong. Anyone would have done the same." "No." The word was absolute. Most people would have looked away. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct. Yet you risked yourself for a stranger. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I said nothing. "I'd like to meet with you," he continued, "to express my gratitude properly. Dinner tonight, perhaps? I have to work. I can arrange for your shift to be covered." Of course he could. Men like him could arrange anything. The thought should have terrified me. It did terrify me. But underneath the fear was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or that fatal flaw my mother had warned me about. "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why do you care? I'm nobody." Silence stretched for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had softened almost imperceptibly. "You're not nobody, Emma, and I always pay my debts. Alessandro will pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my mind reeling. Alessandro took it back through the gap in the door, his expression professionally neutral. 7 o'clock, Miss Carter. I'll be outside." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the absolute certainty that my life had just changed in ways I couldn't begin to understand. I didn't own anything appropriate for dinner with a man like him. My closet was a collection of thrift store finds and clearance rack desperation. Faded jeans, worn t-shirts, my diner uniform. The nicest thing I owned was a black dress I'd bought for a job interview 2 years ago, simple and modest, with a hemline that fell to my knees and sleeves that covered my shoulders. It would have to do. I showered in water that never quite got hot enough, scrubbing away the smell of grease and coffee that had seeped into my skin. My hair, plain brown, nothing special, I left down, brushing it until it fell in soft waves around my shoulders. Makeup was minimal. I didn't own much and didn't know how to apply it anyway. Just some mascara to make my hazel eyes look less tired, and lip balm because my lips were chronically chapped. When I looked in the mirror, I saw exactly what I was, a poor girl playing dress-up, trying to look like she belonged in a world that would chew her up and spit her out. But it was too late to back out now. At precisely 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A new number. I'm outside. I grabbed my coat, threadbare, but warm, and headed downstairs on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. My stomach churned with anxiety, and something dangerously close to anticipation. The car waiting at the curb made me stop dead. It was a black SUV, massive and gleaming, with windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Alessandro stood beside the rear door, and as I approached, he opened it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Miss Carter." I climbed into the back seat, the leather interior so plush it felt like sitting on a cloud. The door closed with a solid thunk that spoke of armor and money, and then we were moving, gliding through the city streets with a smoothness I'd never experienced in my life. I'd expected him to be in the car. Part of me had braced for that confrontation, for those dark eyes in the close confines of the vehicle, but the back seat was empty except for me. Just expensive leather, tinted windows, and the faint scent of that cologne, bergamot and danger. "Where are we going?" I asked Alessandro's back. "Mr. Marchetti owns a restaurant downtown. He's arranged for privacy." Marchetti. So now I had a name for the man who'd taken over my thoughts. It suited him. Elegant, dangerous, unmistakably Italian. The restaurant, when we arrived, was exactly what I should have expected. Exclusive. The kind of place that probably required reservations months in advance and had a dress code I definitely didn't meet. But Alessandro led me through a side entrance, bypassing the main dining room entirely, guiding me up a flight of stairs to a private room that overlooked the city. And there he was. Marchetti stood by the window, his back to me, hands in the pockets of his suit pants. The jacket had been discarded, and his white shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscular, marked with scars that hinted at a violent past. He turned as I entered, and the full force of his attention hit me like a physical blow. "Emma." He moved toward me with that predatory grace, and I forced myself to stand still, to not back away like every instinct demanded. "Thank you for coming." Did I have a choice? The words came out sharper than I'd intended, fear manifesting as defiance. His mouth quirked into something that might have been a smile. "There's always a choice. You could have refused Alessandro. Climbed out a window, called the police." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "But you didn't. Why?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think you do." He gestured to the table, set for two with crystal glasses and china that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Please sit. You must be hungry." I was starving, actually. I'd been too anxious to eat all day. But admitting that felt like admitting weakness, and I'd already shown him too much of that. Still, I sat. Because what else was I going to do? He took the seat across from me, and a waiter appeared. Silent, efficient, pouring wine I definitely couldn't afford before disappearing again. "Tell me about yourself," Marchetti said, his eyes never leaving my face. "There's nothing to tell. Everyone has a story, Emma." He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed in a way that somehow made him more intimidating. "You work at an all-night diner, you live alone in a studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood, and you risk your life for strangers. I find that fascinating." The fact that he'd learned so much about me in less than 12 hours should have terrified me. It did terrify me, but underneath the fear was something else. A strange, heady feeling of being seen, of mattering to someone, even if that someone was dangerous. "I work hard," I said carefully. "I mind my own business. I survive. Except when you don't mind your own business." His head tilted slightly, studying me. "Why did you help me, Emma? The truth." I took a sip of wine to buy myself time. It was incredible, smooth and complex in ways I didn't have words for. Everything about this, the restaurant, the wine, the man across from me, was so far beyond my reality that it felt like a dream. "I saw someone in danger," I finally said. "I couldn't just walk away, even though helping me put you at risk." "Yes. Why? Because I knew what it felt like to be betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you. Because I'd spent my whole life being invisible. And maybe just once I wanted to matter. Because some self-destructive part of me was drawn to the danger he represented. But I couldn't say any of that, because it was the right thing to do. I settled on instead." He watched me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, bringing his face closer to mine. "Those men you warned me about, they're dead now." My breath caught. "What?" "I dealt with the problem, thoroughly." No emotion in his voice, just flat statement of fact. The guards who betrayed me, the men who orchestrated the setup, all of them, gone. I should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual way he discussed murder, but all I could think was that I'd set those deaths in motion. My warning had signed those men's death warrants. "I see I've shocked you," he said, something like amusement in his dark eyes. "Did you think there would be no consequences? In my world, betrayal has only one price. I just wanted..." My voice broke, and I hated myself for it. "You wanted to save my life. You did." He reached across the table, and before I could pull away, his fingers caught my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. His touch was gentle, but implacable, and the heat of his skin against mine made something low in my stomach tighten. "And now I owe you a debt," In my world, that matters. I don't want anything from you, no? His thumb brushed across my cheek, a gesture that felt far too intimate. Not money, not protection, not the life you could have if someone powerful cared about your well-being. I just want to be left alone. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. Liar. And the worst part was, he was right. Dinner was surreal. Course after course appeared, foods I couldn't name, prepared with an artistry that made me almost afraid to eat them. Marchetti watched me taste each dish, his dark eyes cataloging every reaction, every small sound of pleasure I couldn't quite suppress. The wine kept flowing, warming me from the inside, loosening the tight knot of anxiety in my chest. He asked questions, small ones at first, where I grew up, everywhere and nowhere, a string of foster homes, what I liked to read, anything I could get from the library, whether I had family. No, not anymore. I answered cautiously, doling out information in small pieces, waiting for him to lose interest. He never did. Instead, he listened with an intensity that made me feel like every word mattered, like I mattered. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "You're staring at me," I finally said, emboldened by wine and exhaustion and the strange intimacy of the moment. "Yes." No apology, no explanation, just acknowledgement. "Why?" He swirled the wine in his glass, considering. "You intrigue me, Emma. You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone looking for an angle, a way to profit from the situation." He set down his glass, his full attention on me. "But you genuinely want nothing from me. That's rare. Maybe I'm just smart enough to know that getting involved with someone like you is dangerous." "Someone like me," he repeated, amusement flickering across his features. "And what am I, Emma? A killer, a criminal, a man who radiated danger like heat from a flame, but also someone who listened when I spoke, who looked at me like I was worth looking at, who made me feel something other than exhausted and invisible for the first time in years." "I don't know," I whispered. "Good." He leaned back, and I could breathe again. Uncertainty keeps you careful. Careful keeps you alive. The waiter returned to clear our plates, and Marchetti stood, offering me his hand. "Come. I want to show you something." Every self-preservation instinct I possessed screamed at me to refuse, but my hand was already reaching for his, my fingers sliding into his palm, his warmth enveloping me as he pulled me gently to my feet. He led me to the window, his hand settling on the small of my back. Possessive, protective, burning through the thin fabric of my dress. The city spread out below us, a sea of lights that looked almost beautiful from this height. "Do you see that?" He pointed to a cluster of buildings in the distance. "I own those. And that warehouse district, mine. The docks, the restaurant we're standing in, half the businesses on 5th Street." His voice was matter-of-fact, not boastful. "I've built an empire, Emma, from nothing. Through crime," I said quietly. "Through survival." His hand pressed slightly firmer against my back. "I came to this country with nothing. No family, no money, no legal way to claw my way up. So I found an illegal way, and I never apologized for it. I should have been repulsed. Should have pulled away from his touch and demanded he take me home. But instead I found myself leaning slightly into him, craving the solid warmth of his body against mine. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He turned me to face him, his hands coming up to frame my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. This close, I could see every detail. The small scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the absolute focus in those dark eyes that made me feel like I was falling. "I want to keep you," he said simply. "I want to put you somewhere safe, somewhere you never have to worry about rent or tips or working yourself to death in a diner that doesn't appreciate you. I want to know that you're protected, taken care of, mine. I'm not. I can't be owned." But even as I said it, something in me thrilled at the possessiveness in his voice. Everyone can be owned, Emma. The only question is the price. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I shivered. What's yours? What would it take for you to let me take care of you? Nothing. There's no price because I'm not for sale. So proud, he murmured. And there was something dark and hungry in his expression now. So determined to survive on your own. But you're drowning, Emma. I can see it. The exhaustion, the fear, the weight of trying to keep your head above water with no help, no safety net. How much longer can you last? Too long. Not long enough. Forever and no time at all. I'm fine, I insisted, but my voice shook. You're not fine. You're breaking. His hands tightened on my face. Not painful, but inescapable. Let me catch you. Let me give you the life you deserve. And what would you want in return? The question came out bitter. Nothing's free. Men like you don't give without taking. Something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe, or hurt. I want your honesty, your trust, your presence in my life. He paused, his eyes searching mine. And eventually, if you're willing, everything else you have to give. My heart hammered against my ribs. You mean sex? I mean you, Emma. All of you. Your body, yes, but also your thoughts, your fears, your dreams. I want to know every part of you. His voice dropped lower. But I'm a patient man, and dark. I can wait until you're ready. Until you come to me willingly. That will never happen, won't it? He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. You're already here. Already letting me touch you. Already wondering what it would be like to say yes. He was right, and I hated him for it. Hated myself more for the way my body responded to his proximity. The way I wanted to close the distance between us and find out if his lips were as dangerous as the rest of him. I should go, I whispered. But I didn't move. Yes, you should. His lips brushed my forehead, a gesture so gentle it made my chest ache. But you won't. Not yet. He took me home an hour later, after I'd finally found the strength to pull away from him, to insist that I needed to leave. Alessandro drove in silence while I sat in the back, my mind spinning, my skin still tingling where Marchetti had touched me. We'd exchanged numbers. I'd agreed to let him call me. Small concessions that felt enormous, like I'd given away pieces of myself I couldn't get back. When the SUV pulled up outside my building, Alessandro opened my door, but it was Marchetti who emerged from the front passenger seat. I hadn't even known he was in the car. I'll walk you up, he said, leaving no room for argument. My neighbors would talk. Mrs. Chen would have questions. But I was too tired to care, too overwhelmed by everything that had happened to put up more resistance. He followed me up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, his presence at my back both protective and predatory. When I unlocked my door, he stopped me before I could enter, his hand on my wrist. Emma. He pulled me back against his chest, his arms wrapping around me from behind, enveloping me in his warmth and that intoxicating scent of bergamot and danger. Thank you. For tonight. For everything. I should have pulled away. Should have told him this was too much, too fast, too dangerous. But I was so tired of being alone. So tired of being cold and scared and invisible. So instead, I let myself lean back against him. Just for a moment. Just long enough to pretend that someone strong had my back, that I wasn't facing the world entirely alone. Sleep well, he murmured against my hair. Then he released me and was gone, his footsteps fading down the stairs, leaving me standing in my doorway with my heart in my throat and the ghost of his touch burning on my skin. The next 3 days were the strangest of my life. Flowers arrived at the diner, expensive arrangements that made Gary suspicious and the other waitresses jealous. My phone buzzed with texts. Good morning messages. Questions about my day. Photos of the city at dawn taken from what must have been his penthouse. He was courting me, I realized. Wooing me with the focused intensity he probably applied to everything in his life. And despite every logical reason to refuse, to block his number and pretend none of this had happened, I found myself responding. Small messages at first, then longer conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. He wanted to know everything about me, what I dreamed about, what scared me, what made me laugh, and slowly, against my better judgment, I told him. I told him about my mother, who'd died of an overdose when I was 12. About the foster homes that had ranged from neglectful to abusive. About aging out of the system at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and a fierce determination to survive. He listened. He remembered. And he never once made me feel like my poverty was something to be ashamed of. On the 4th day, I came home to find my landlord waiting outside my apartment. "Miss Carter, Mrs. Chen said, her expression unreadable. "Your rent has been paid, for the year." My stomach dropped. "What? By who?" "Anonymous benefactor, cashier's check." She handed me an envelope. "There's more. Instructions to fix the heating, repair any damage. Consider yourself very lucky." I didn't feel lucky. I felt trapped. Inside the envelope was a note in elegant handwriting. "Everyone deserves to be warm." I called him immediately, my hands shaking with anger and something that felt dangerously like tears. You can't do things like this," I shouted the moment he answered. "Good evening to you too, Emma." He sounded amused, which only made me angrier. "I didn't ask for your help. I don't want your money." "It's not about what you want. It's about what you need." His voice remained calm, reasonable, infuriating. "You were living in a freezing apartment, working yourself to exhaustion to barely make rent. I fixed a problem. You're trying to own me. I'm trying to take care of you. There's a difference." "Is there?" My voice broke, and I hated myself for it. "You're making me dependent on you, making it so I can't refuse you." Silence stretched for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had gone cold. "Get dressed. Alessandra will be there in 20 minutes. We need to talk. In person." "I don't—" "20 minutes, Emma. Don't make me come get you myself." The line went dead. This time, Alessandro took me to a different location, a penthouse apartment that occupied the entire top floor of a building overlooking the river. The elevator required a key card to access, and when the doors opened, I stepped directly into a living space that was more museum than home. Everything was expensive, minimalist, perfect. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture that looked like art installations, not a single personal touch anywhere. Marchetti stood by the windows, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand, his shoulders tense in a way I'd never seen before. "You're angry with me," he said without turning around. "You're trying to control my life. I'm trying to improve it." He finally faced me, and the intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. "Do you have any idea what it does to me, knowing you're cold, hungry, working yourself to death for pennies? I have the resources to fix these things. Why shouldn't I? Because I didn't ask you to, because every gift comes with strings attached, and I don't know what yours are yet." I was shouting now, all my fear and confusion pouring out as anger. "You're not doing this because you're kind. You're doing this because you want something from me, and I don't know what it is." In 3 strides, he crossed the distance between us, his hands gripping my upper arms, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to hold me in place. "You want to know what I want? Fine. I'll tell you." His eyes bored into mine, dark and intense and completely unguarded for the first time since I'd met him. "I want to wake up knowing you're safe. I want to come home to someone who isn't afraid of what I am. I want to build something with someone who sees me as a man, not just a monster or a meal ticket." His grip tightened slightly. "My whole life, Emma, everyone has wanted something from me. Money, protection, power. But you? You wanted nothing. You risked yourself for me when you had every reason not to. Do you understand how rare that is? How precious? So this is gratitude?" My voice shook. "You're trying to buy me because I did you a favor?" "This is me being selfish," he corrected, his voice rough. "This is me seeing something I want and taking it. That's what I do, Emma. I see an opportunity and I seize it. And you're the best opportunity I've had in years." "I'm not an opportunity. I'm a person. You're a person I'm obsessed with." The admission seemed torn from him. "You've been in my head for 4 days straight. I can't think about anything else. Can't focus on business. Can't sleep. All I can think about is you in that freezing apartment, you working yourself to exhaustion, you living a life so far beneath what you deserve." His hand slid from my arms to my face, cradling it gently despite the intensity in his voice. So yes, I paid your rent. And I'll do a hell of a lot more if you let me. Not because I'm trying to control you, but because taking care of you gives me a sense of purpose I haven't felt in years. Tears burned in my eyes. You don't even know me. Then let me. Stay here tonight. Let me show you what your life could be like. No pressure, no expectations. Just one night where you're warm and safe and don't have to worry about anything. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. Please, Emma. Let me give you this. I should have said no. Should have walked away while I still could before I got in any deeper, but I was so tired. Tired of struggling, of surviving, of being alone. And he was offering me a night where I didn't have to be any of those things. One night, I whispered, that's all. The smile that broke across his face was genuine, boyish even, transforming him into someone younger, less dangerous. One night, he agreed. But we both knew it was a lie. He gave me space that night, and somehow that was worse than if he'd pushed. Marchetti showed me to a guest room, though calling it that felt inadequate. It was larger than my entire apartment, with a bed so enormous I could have fit 3 of me across it. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, with a shower that had more settings than my car back when I'd owned a car. Plush towels, expensive toiletries, a robe so soft it felt like wearing a cloud. Everything you need should be here, he said from the doorway, maintaining a careful distance. But if you want anything, I'm just down the hall. Last door on the left. You're not... I couldn't finish the sentence, but he understood. I meant what I said, Emma. No pressure, no expectations. His eyes held mine, sincere in a way that made my chest tight. Tonight you sleep safe and warm. That's all I need. He closed the door softly behind him, and I was alone in more luxury than I'd ever experienced in my life. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt strangely bereft. The shower was a revelation, hot water that never ran cold, pressure that actually worked, enough space to move around. I stood under the spray until my skin turned pink, washing away days of exhaustion and grease and fear. When I finally emerged, wrapped in that impossibly soft robe, I found clothes laid out on the bed, women's clothes, in my size. A t-shirt and sleep pants, simple and comfortable. Nothing provocative or suggestive. Just clean, soft fabric that smelled like expensive detergent. The fact that he'd thought of this, that he'd prepared for the possibility I might say yes, should have alarmed me. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in my chest. I climbed into the bed, and it was like sinking into a cloud. The sheets were Egyptian cotton. I'd only ever read about Egyptian cotton, and the mattress seemed to mold itself to my body. For the first time in years, I was warm. Truly, completely warm. I should have fallen asleep immediately. Instead, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. What was I doing here? What was I letting happen? This man was a criminal, a killer, someone who operated in the shadows and probably destroyed anyone who got in his way. Getting involved with him was insane. Suicidal, even. But he'd also listened to me like I mattered, looked at me like I was worth seeing, offered me safety and warmth and care without demanding anything in return. At least not yet. Around 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep and padded out of the room in my borrowed clothes. The penthouse was quiet, dim with ambient city light filtering through those massive windows. I made my way toward the living room, drawn by the view of the city spread out like stars below. Couldn't sleep? I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. Marchetti stood near the windows, a glass of whiskey in his hand, still dressed in his shirt and pants, though the shirt was now untucked, the top buttons undone. He looked tired, I realized. Human. Sorry, I said. I didn't mean to disturb you. You didn't. He gestured to the couch. Come. Keep me company. I hesitated, but the pull of his presence was too strong. I crossed to the couch, curling up on one end while he settled on the other, maintaining that careful distance. Why can't you sleep? I asked. Old habits. In my line of work, sleeping too deeply can get you killed. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes on the city below. I've trained myself to wake at the slightest sound, to always be alert. It's lonely, but it's kept me alive. Do you ever wish you could just stop? Walk away from all of it? He was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes, late at night when I'm alone and tired, I think about what it would be like to be normal. To have a job that doesn't require armed guards and paranoia. To go to bed without wondering if I'll wake up with a knife in my back. He turned to look at me, and the vulnerability in his expression made my breath catch. But then morning comes, and I remember that this is who I am. This is what I built, and I can't walk away from it any more than I can walk away from my own skin. That sounds exhausting. It is. He set down his glass. But meeting you, that's been the first thing in a long time that's made me think about something other than survival and power. What do you think about instead? What it would be like to come home to you? The admission was quiet, almost tentative. To have someone who sees me as more than the monster I've had to become. Someone soft in a life full of sharp edges. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'm not soft. I've survived things that would break most people. That's what makes you perfect. He shifted slightly closer, though still not touching. You're strong enough to survive in my world, but gentle enough that you haven't let it destroy your humanity. You still care about strangers, still help people even when it costs you. That's rare, Emma. That's precious. Or it's stupid, I said, my voice thick. My mom used to say I had too big a heart for this world. Your mother was wrong. His hand reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and when I didn't, his fingers brushed my cheek with infinite gentleness. The world needs people like you. I need people like you. You don't need anyone. You're the most self-sufficient person I've ever met. Self-sufficient and lonely aren't mutually exclusive. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I shivered. I've spent 15 years building walls, Emma. Being the man who doesn't need anyone, who can't be hurt or controlled or betrayed, because he never lets anyone close enough to matter. And then you walked into my life and handed me a note that changed everything. I just didn't want you to die, I know. That's what makes it so powerful. He leaned closer, and I could smell his cologne mixed with whiskey and something uniquely him. You gave me something without expecting anything back. Do you understand how that feels for someone like me? Someone who's spent his entire life in a world where everything is transactional? I'm scared, I whispered. Of you. Of this. Of what happens if I let myself feel what I'm starting to feel. What are you starting to feel? His voice was barely audible, his face so close I could feel his breath on my lips. Like I'm falling. Like your gravity. And I've lost the ability to resist. Then stop resisting. His forehead pressed against mine, his hand sliding into my hair. Fall, Emma. I promise I'll catch you. And if you don't, if this all falls apart and I get hurt, then I'll destroy whatever hurt you, including myself, if necessary. The vow was absolute, fierce. You're mine now, Emma, whether you've admitted it yet or not. And I protect what's mine. I should have been frightened by the possessiveness in his voice, the absolute certainty with which he claimed me. Instead, something in me thrilled at it, at being wanted so completely, so intensely, by someone so powerful. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I've been alone for so long. So have I. His lips brushed my forehead, soft and reverent. We'll figure it out together. And then he was kissing me, slowly, carefully, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't want to pull away. I wanted to sink into him, into this feeling of being wanted and safe and seen. His lips were soft but firm, tasting of whiskey and something darker, something addictive. His hand in my hair tightened slightly as I kissed him back, and the small sound he made, somewhere between a groan and a sigh, sent heat flooding through my body. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine again. Stay, he whispered. Not just tonight. Stay with me. Let me take care of you. I don't know if I can, I said honestly. I don't know if I'm strong enough for your world. You're stronger than you think, and you won't be alone in it. I'll be right beside you. His hand cupped my face, his thumb brushing my swollen lips. Say yes, Emma. Take a chance on me. On us. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was insane, that I barely knew him, that his world was dangerous and dark and would probably destroy me. But my heart, that too big heart my mother had warned me about, whispered something different. It whispered that I'd already fallen, that trying to resist was pointless, that for the first time in my life, someone was offering me not just survival, but something more, something that looked almost like belonging. Yes, I breathed, and watched his eyes light up with fierce satisfaction. I'll stay. The next 3 weeks were a dream wrapped in darkness. Marchetti, Dante, he'd insisted I call him in private, moved me into the penthouse with an efficiency that should have alarmed me. Alessandro and another guard collected my few belongings from my apartment. He paid off the lease. He even arranged for my shifts at the diner to be covered, though I suspected arranged meant paid Gary enough money to make it worth his while. I should have protested more, should have insisted on maintaining some independence. But the truth was, I was exhausted from years of barely surviving. And letting Dante take care of things felt like finally being able to breathe after drowning for so long. He gave me space in the penthouse, my own room, though I rarely slept there, my own bathroom, access to everything, but he also gave me boundaries, rules meant to keep me safe in his dangerous world. You don't go anywhere without Alessandro or Marco, he'd said the first morning, his tone leaving no room for argument. We were having breakfast, actual breakfast, not stale coffee and regret, at the massive dining table, not to the store, not for a walk, nowhere. My enemies would love to get their hands on someone I care about. That sounds like a prison, I'd protested weakly. That's the reality of my life. His hand had covered mine, warm and firm. I know it's not fair, but I won't risk you, Emma. Not for anything. So I'd agreed, because what choice did I have? And because the alternative, going back to my freezing apartment and double shifts and constant exhaustion, felt impossible now that I'd tasted what life could be like. Dante was attentive. He texted me throughout the day when he was handling business. He came home for dinner every night, no matter how late. He asked about my day, my thoughts, my dreams. He bought me books and clothes and anything I mentioned wanting, even casually. He also touched me constantly. His hand on my back, his fingers in my hair, his lips on my forehead. Gentle touches mostly, affectionate. But underneath them, I could always feel the leashed intensity. The hunger he kept carefully controlled. We'd kissed several times since that first night, but he'd never pushed for more, never demanded anything I wasn't ready to give. It was maddening and sweet in equal measure. I can wait, he'd murmured one night when I'd pulled away, breathless and shaking with want. Until you're sure. Until you're ready. What if I'm never ready? I'd asked, only half joking. His smile had been dark, knowing. You will be. You already want me, Emma. You're just afraid to admit it. He'd been right, damn him. But life with Dante wasn't all luxury and romance. There were phone calls in the middle of the night, shouted in rapid Italian, guards who appeared and disappeared, meetings in his study that I wasn't allowed to attend, blood on his shirt one night that he'd tried to hide before I saw it. Business, he'd said shortly when I'd cornered him about it. Nothing for you to worry about. I'm living in your home. I think I have a right to worry. His expression had softened, and he'd pulled me close, uncaring of the blood. I handle things that need handling. Sometimes it gets messy, but I'll never let that mess touch you. You're separate from all of this, something clean and good in my otherwise dark life. I'm not some saint, Dante. I'm just a person. You're my person, he'd corrected. And that makes you untouchable. The possessiveness should have alarmed me. Instead, it made me feel safe in a way I'd never experienced. Like I finally had someone in my corner, someone who would burn down the world before letting it hurt me. On the 22nd day, everything changed. I was in the living room, reading a book Dante had bought me, when Alessandro appeared with a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful. Dark hair, striking features, expensive clothes that screamed old money. And she looked at me with such hatred that I instinctively shrank back. So you're the new pet, she said, her voice cultured but cold. How quaint. Excuse me? I stood, the book falling from my lap. Isabella, Alessandro said, his voice tight with warning. Mr. Marchetti doesn't want you here. I don't care what Dante wants. She moved into the room like she owned it, her eyes never leaving me. I need to see what was worth throwing away 5 years for. My stomach dropped. 5 years? We were engaged, Isabella said, her smile sharp as a knife. Until he decided I wasn't suitable anymore. Something about family loyalty, about needing someone from within the organization. And then I hear he's shacked up with some nobody waitress, and I have to see for myself. Isabella, leave, now. Alessandro moved between us, but she ignored him. Does he treat you well? She tilted her head, studying me like a bug under glass. Does he buy you pretty things, make you feel special? That's his pattern. He makes you feel like you're the center of his universe, right up until you're not useful anymore. That's enough. Dante's voice cut through the room like a blade, and I spun to see him standing in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. Get out of my home. Your home? Isabella laughed, bitter and sharp. I helped you choose this place, remember? Before you decided I wasn't good enough. Before you threw me away like garbage. I ended our engagement because you tried to have me killed, Dante said flatly. Don't pretend this is about romance. You wanted my territory, and when I wouldn't hand it over, you conspired with my enemies. So yes, Isabella, I threw you away, just like I'd throw away any other threat. She paled, but her chin lifted defiantly. And what about her? She gestured to me. How long until she does something you don't like? How long until she's the threat you eliminate? Emma is nothing like you. Dante crossed the room in 3 strides, his arm wrapping around my waist, pulling me against his side. She's loyal. She's genuine. She chose to save my life when she had nothing to gain from it. You chose to end it because you had everything to gain. We're done here. Alessandro physically escorted Isabella out, her protests echoing through the penthouse. When the door finally closed, silence fell like a weight. Are you okay? Dante turned me to face him, his hands framing my face, his eyes searching mine. Is it true? Were you really engaged? Yes. 3 years ago. And I ended it when I discovered she was working with the Rossi family to orchestrate my death. His thumb brushed my cheek. She's bitter, dangerous, and everything she said was designed to make you doubt me. Did you love her? He was quiet for a long moment. I thought I did, but what I felt for her was nothing compared to what I feel for you. You barely know me, Dante. I know enough. His voice was fierce, absolute. I know you're brave and kind and strong. I know you make me want to be better than I am. I know that when I'm with you, the darkness doesn't feel quite so suffocating. That's more than I ever had with Isabella or anyone else. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that what we had was real, not just some fantasy I'd built in my head. But Isabella's words had planted seeds of doubt that I couldn't quite shake. What happens if I disappoint you? I whispered. If I'm not who you think I am. Then we figure it out together. He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me, solid and safe. I'm not going to throw you away, Emma. You're not disposable to me. You're everything. I buried my face in his chest, breathing in his scent, letting his warmth chase away the chill Isabella had left behind. I'm scared, I admitted. So am I. The confession surprised me, and I pulled back to look at him. His expression was raw, vulnerable. I'm terrified of losing you, of you realizing what I really am, and running, of my world destroying the best thing that's ever happened to me, but I'm more scared of not trying, of letting fear keep me from having something real. What do? We trust each other. His hand slid into my hair, tilting my face up to his. We take it one day at a time, and we don't let bitter ex-fiancés ruin what we're building. I managed a weak laugh when you put it that way. Emma. His voice dropped, intimate and dark. I need you to understand something. I'm not a good man. I've done terrible things, and I'll probably do more before this is all over. But with you, I want to be better. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me. And who do I see? Someone worth saving. His lips brushed mine, soft and reverent, the way you saved me that night in the diner. This time when we kissed, it was different, deeper, more desperate. His hands tightened in my hair, and I pressed closer, needing to feel all of him, needing to drown in this feeling before fear and doubt could steal it away. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were dark with want. "Come to bed with me," he said, his voice rough, not as my guest, as mine. My heart hammered, but I didn't hesitate. Yes. His bedroom was different from the rest of the penthouse, warmer somehow, more personal. Dark wood furniture, charcoal gray linens, and the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. This was his sanctuary, and he was inviting me in. Dante closed the door behind us, and suddenly the enormity of what I'd agreed to hit me. My hands trembled as I stood in the center of the room, acutely aware of his presence behind me, the heat of him radiating through the space between us. "Emma." His hands settled on my shoulders, gentle but firm. "If you're not ready, I am." I turned to face him, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want this. I want you." Something fierce and hungry flashed in his dark eyes, but he moved slowly, giving me time to change my mind. His hands cupped my face with infinite tenderness, his thumbs brushing my cheeks as he studied me like I was something precious. "You're sure?" Instead of answering, I reached up and pulled his face down to mine, kissing him with all the fear and desire and desperate need I'd been holding back for weeks. He made a sound low in his throat, possessive and raw, and suddenly the careful control he'd maintained shattered. His arms wrapped around me, crushing me against his chest as he kissed me deeply, thoroughly, like he was trying to memorize every part of me. His hands moved over my body, my back, my waist, my hips, claiming me with every touch. I clutched at his shirt, needing him closer, needing more. We stumbled toward the bed, a tangle of urgent hands and breathless kisses. He was gentle even in his hunger, laying me down on the soft mattress like I was something that could break. And maybe I was. Maybe we both were. Two broken people finding something whole in each other. "I've got you," he whispered against my lips. "I'll always have you." And as the city lights filtered through the windows, casting shadows across his face, I believed him. I woke to sunlight and warmth, wrapped in Dante's arms with my head on his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, a rhythm that felt like safety, like home. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, and I knew he'd been awake for a while, just holding me. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning." I tilted my face up to look at him, and the softness in his expression made my chest ache. This was a side of him nobody else saw. Vulnerable, unguarded, almost boyish in the morning light. "How do you feel?" His hand cupped my cheek, his thumb brushing my lower lip. "Different," I admitted, "like something's changed. Everything's changed." He kissed my forehead, my nose, my lips. Soft, reverent touches. "You're mine now. Completely." The possessiveness should have scared me, but instead it made me feel cherished, protected, like I finally belonged somewhere. We stayed in bed for hours, talking and touching and learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with last night. He told me about his childhood in Sicily, the poverty that had driven him to America, the violence that had shaped him into who he was. I told him about the foster homes, the loneliness, the constant fear of never being enough. "You're more than enough," he said fiercely. "You're everything." Around noon, Alessandro knocked discreetly, and reality intruded. Dante had business to handle, calls to make, an empire to run. But before he left the bedroom, he pulled me close one more time. "I have meetings today, but I'll be home for dinner. Don't leave the penthouse without Alessandro." His voice was gentle but firm. "I mean it, Emma. My world is dangerous, and now that people know you matter to me, you're a target." "I understand. Do you?" His eyes searched mine. "Isabella showing up yesterday wasn't random. Word is spreading that I have someone important to me. My enemies will try to use that against me. I need you to be careful." Fear skittered down my spine, but I nodded. "I'll be careful." "Good." He kissed me once more, deep and claiming, before finally releasing me. "I'll see you tonight." The afternoon passed quietly. I read, explored the penthouse more thoroughly, tried to wrap my mind around the fact that this was my life now. No more diner, No more struggling to make rent, no more exhaustion that seeped into my bones. Instead, I had luxury, safety, and a man who looked at me like I was his entire world. It should have felt like a fairy tale, and it did, mostly. Except fairy tales didn't include armed guards and blood on shirts and bitter ex-fiancés with murder in their eyes. Around 4, my old phone buzzed. The one I'd kept even though Dante had offered to buy me a new one, a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Emma Carter? A man's voice, unfamiliar and cold. Who is this? Someone who knows what you're involved in. Someone who can help you get out before it's too late. My stomach dropped. I don't know what you're talking about. Dante Marchetti is a killer, Miss Carter. A monster. And you're sleeping in his bed, making yourself complicit in everything he does. The FBI has been building a case against him for years. We could use your testimony. I have nothing to say. My hands shook, but my voice stayed steady. We can protect you, give you a new identity, a new life. You don't have to be his victim. I'm not a victim. The words came out fierce, surprising even me, and I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. Don't call this number again. I hung up, my heart racing. The FBI. They were watching Dante, watching me. The danger wasn't just from his enemies. It was from the law itself. I should have been terrified, should have questioned everything. Instead, I felt only a fierce protectiveness, a certainty that I wouldn't betray him. Not to the FBI, not to anyone. When Dante came home that evening, I told him everything. His face went hard as I recounted the conversation, his jaw clenching with barely controlled rage. They're getting desperate, he said, pulling me against his chest. They can't touch me directly, so they're trying to use you. I'm sorry, Emma. This is what I was afraid of. I didn't tell them anything. I wouldn't. He pulled back to look at me, his eyes searching. Why? You could walk away from all of this. They'd protect you, give you a normal life. Why would you choose me instead? Because you're mine too, I said simply. And I don't abandon what's mine. The kiss he gave me was bruising, desperate, filled with everything he couldn't say. When we finally broke apart, his forehead pressed against mine, his breathing ragged. I love you, he whispered, the words raw and honest. I didn't plan to, didn't want to, but I do. I love you, Emma. Tears burned in my eyes. I love you too. God help me. But 3 months later, everything came to a head. The FBI had been circling, pressure mounting from all sides. Dante's organization was under siege, not just from law enforcement, but from rival families who saw his distraction with me as weakness. There had been attempts on his life, close calls that left me sleepless with fear. Isabella had returned twice more, each time more unhinged, each time with thinly veiled threats. The last time, Alessandro had physically removed her from the building, but not before she'd screamed that she'd make me pay for stealing what was hers. Dante had become more protective, more possessive. He rarely let me out of his sight when he was home, and when he wasn't, I had 3 guards instead of 1. The penthouse felt less like a home, and more like a gilded cage. We fought about it. Loud, passionate arguments that always ended the same way, with him pulling me close and reminding me that his paranoia was the only thing keeping me alive. I can't lose you, he'd say, his voice breaking. You're the only good thing in my life. If something happened to you because of me, it would destroy me. Then maybe we should stop, I'd whisper, even though the thought of leaving him felt like ripping out my own heart. Maybe I'm making you weaker, more vulnerable. You make me stronger. His hands would frame my face, his eyes burning with intensity. You give me something to fight for beyond power and survival. Don't you understand? You're not my weakness. You're my reason for everything. On a cold March evening, it all came crashing down. Dante had a meeting, an important one with the heads of several allied families. Neutral territory, carefully planned, supposedly safe. But I'd learned to trust my instincts, and something about this felt wrong. Don't go, I begged him as he prepared to leave. Please, Dante. Something feels off. I have to. He kissed me softly. This meeting could end the war, establish peace. I can't miss it. Then let me come with you. Absolutely not. You stay here where it's safe. Alessandro and Marco are with me. I'll be fine. But he wasn't fine. The call came 2 hours later. Alessandro, his voice tight with controlled panic. There was an ambush. The boss is hurt. We're bringing him to the penthouse. Get the doctor there now. I'd never moved faster in my life. Calling Dante's private physician. Preparing the bedroom. My hands shaking so badly I could barely function. When they finally arrived, Dante was pale and bleeding from a gunshot wound to his shoulder, his shirt soaked with blood. I'm okay, he gasped as they laid him on the bed. Emma, I'm okay. But he wasn't okay. The bullet had missed anything vital. But he'd lost blood, and the pain was clearly excruciating even as he tried to hide it from me. I stayed by his side through everything. The doctor digging out the bullet, the stitches, the antibiotics. I held his hand and let him squeeze until my fingers went numb, and I didn't complain once. When it was finally over, and the doctor had left, Dante pulled me down beside him on the bed, his good arm wrapping around me. I'm sorry, he whispered. You were right. I should have listened. You're alive. That's all that matters. Tears streamed down my face. God, Dante, when Alessandro called, I thought, I know. He kissed my tears away, but I'm here. I'm not leaving you. Who did this? His jaw clenched. Isabella. She orchestrated the whole thing, used my meeting to set up an ambush. But she made a mistake. She failed, and now she's signed her death warrant. Dante. No, his voice was hard, final. She tried to kill me, Emma. She endangered you by extension. That can't go unanswered. I wanted to argue, to tell him that more violence wasn't the answer. But I knew his world, knew the rules he lived by, and I knew that Isabella wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. 2 days later, Isabella was found dead in her apartment. The news called it a suicide, but I knew better. Dante never confirmed it, but the satisfied look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. His enemies had underestimated him. Thought his feelings for me made him weak. They'd learned too late that loving me had only made him more dangerous, more ruthless in protecting what was his. The FBI eventually gave up on flipping me. Dante consolidated his power, eliminating threats and building alliances, and through it all, I stayed by his side, his weakness and his strength, his conscience and his reason. We never talked about leaving, about finding a normal life. We both knew this was who we were now. A monster, and the woman who loved him anyway. A criminal, and his salvation. On our first anniversary of that night in the diner, Dante took me to the rooftop of his building. The city spread out beneath us, glittering and alive. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a diamond that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow fragments. Marry me, he said, and it wasn't a question. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life keeping you safe and making you happy. I should have hesitated. Should have thought about what I was agreeing to. A life in the shadows, always looking over my shoulder, forever tied to a dangerous man in a dangerous world. But I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, and let him slide the ring onto my finger where it fit perfectly, like it had been made for me, like I'd been made for this life. For him. He kissed me as the city lights sparkled below us, and I knew, whatever came next, whatever darkness we had to face, we'd face it together. I'd walked into that diner exhausted and invisible, just trying to survive another shift. I'd walked out having saved a man's life and lost my own heart in the process. And I wouldn't change a single thing.